All right, and I want to welcome Elizabeth Sherman to Indispensable Leadership. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
So glad that you could join us. You know, you're a life coach, you're a weight loss person, and you're an entrepreneur. So these are all things that we talk a lot about on this show. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about all of those things. But first, let's just start about what's going on today. You're in the front line, you're talking to a lot of people, and I have a lot of anecdotal evidence that nobody is worried about their weight right now. That everyone is sitting at home and drinking and doing whatever they can possibly do just to feel like they have a little control and a little pleasure. So, what are you running into as you talk to people right now during this pandemic?
Well, I think that people are still worried about their weight. People who were worried about their weight before are still worried about their weight,
Uh,
but they're just not, they're coping with it in different ways. So maybe they're shoving it off until later, or they don't feel like they can deal with that right now. But the truth is that the reason that well, whenever we have a pandemic or a crisis, the coping skills that we had before are just intensified, right?
right.
So if I'm emotionally eating before, I'm
Hmm.
just doing more of it right now. And so the truth is that people are still concerned about their weight. They're still concerned about their health. They just don't know potentially that there's another way
Hmm.
than the way that they're dealing with it right now.
So basically, if you've been already dealing with people and you've already got them on board of how to control their lives, they're going to have less of they're less likely to hide under the table right now and eat Oreo cookies and wash it down with vodka, is what you're saying.
Right. But, the other thing to that is that there are a number of folks who are reaching out to me. I've had an uptick in my business recently.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is because people are seeing this as a time of reevaluation, and they're looking at, okay, I'm not going out to dinner. I'm not, I don't have meetings and parties and all of these things. Maybe right now is a time to reprioritize what we haven't been prioritizing before, and I really want to foster connection with those people that I live with, that we've all been behind screens. And so let's connect with each other. And that kind of starts with connecting with ourselves first. And part of connecting with ourselves is understanding, what am I feeling during all of this? How do I cope with it? And how do I really manage all of these feelings that I have in a constructive way?
Hmm. And people have extra time, so now's a time where you could. Of course, most people have been they're not able to go to their health club, they're not able to go to their yoga place.
Right.
So you're talking to people about other ways they can try to be healthy in this time where you're not supposed to really be out and about.
Yeah. Well, it's probably surprising to hear me say this, especially since I started off my health career as a personal trainer. But for people who are trying to lose weight or even just stay healthy, one of the best methods to doing that is not to have intentional exercise,
Uh,
but to be active and to move and to just to walk. And so, what walking does, and I don't really like thinking about exercise as a calories in versus calories out type of equation,
right.
but rather, I love walking because it manages stress and it helps us process information. And so, really, where we need to be focusing right now is managing our own mind, managing our own thinking, managing our stress, which will then in turn help us not eat everything that's in the cupboard.
Yeah, it's interesting that you would say that because I give tours in Philadelphia, historical walking tours, and
Yeah.
people are always surprised that John Adams lived till 92, and Jefferson and Madison and Monroe and Franklin, they all lived into their 80s.
Mhm.
And I always say, yeah, walking for one thing, as bad as things were in terms of medicine and everything, number one, everyone walked.
Yeah.
Um, which if people are taking my walking tour, they're one of the 5% who don't go on the bus and just drive around the 8 blocks of
Yeah.
literally 8 blocks of Philadelphia that we look at. So I can tell them this, but people are walking, and of course, everything's Whole Foods in the 1700s, right? You don't have to
Mhm.
avoid these things that we've created for ourselves because they're out there. But it was such a part of life back then. Nobody thought about it that much as exercise.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, John Adams, you read the journals and he's walking 5 miles, and he isn't exactly the most fit guy in the world. But you're either riding your horse or you're walking around.
Mhm. And, that's actually a really interesting point that, you know, thinness does not equate fitness.
Mhm.
And I think that when we look at people, we kind of judge them based on their body shape, but, it's really not true. Someone can be just a stockier person and hold their weight differently, but actually be very fit physically. And that's actually what will is a better indicator of longevity than weight. Yeah, good point.
So when people come to you with weight loss, I'm sure a
Yeah,
lot of times people come to you and they want thin. That's what
yeah.
that's what I have a friend who used to teach at like one of these health club places, and he's this short guy. He's fit, but nobody wanted to hire him. They wanted to hire people who have huge muscles and who look really buff.
Mhm.
And it drives him crazy because he feels like that's not necessarily what they're looking for from him isn't necessarily the most healthy alternative. So how do you
Mhm.
handle that when you're meeting with a new client who is all about the weight loss?
Mhm. Well, so a couple things there. One is I think that as we get older, we stop the fantasy of having a six pack, and most of the clients that I work with really just want to feel good again. They're not sleeping well.
Mhm.
Their energy is all over the place. They're not focused at work. And yeah, they just want to feel young and energetic again. So, I mean, sure, I get people who want to lose weight, especially women who are over the age of 40 when our weight starts to shift around the middle and their pants aren't fitting
Mhm.
right anymore. And so there are certainly some tips and tricks that we can do with that. But it's really kind of interesting that when we when we pursue weight loss, what we're really pursuing is a certain feeling. So how is it that we want to feel? And usually that's confident or you know uh confident, secure, in control. And so we can actually have the of our body and appreciation for ourselves.
Mhm.
Then what happens is we actually treat our bodies with better respect than if we don't like ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're feeling kind of ucky, then which a lot of people are right now when they're sitting in their homes, with the virus, with the quarantine, they're feeling kind of stagnant and just like blah. We're more likely to just feed ourselves with bad foods. And so if we can turn it, and that's what's actually really interesting about health is that, when we look at eating, exercise, sleep, and stress management, all of those aspects of our lives are really building off of one another. So as much as when one goes down, they all go down, when one goes up, they all go up too. So if we can start feeding ourselves with good foods, then we're more likely to have better sleep. When
Mhm.
we have better sleep, we're more likely to move more. When we move more, we manage our stress, which then, creates this cascading effect of eating better. And when we take care of ourselves, then we will naturally, what I call right size. So it's not necessarily losing weight, but being the right weight for our body and body style.
And of course, what you say, I'm sure, enters into everything that you help people with in life coaching, because people come to you and say they want something. And, to say you want to be rich, no, you want what you think that will get you,
Exactly. Yeah.
and what is that? And a lot of
Hmm.
people don't even particularly go into that. So I guess you're helping them in all the different areas.
Well, it's actually really kind of interesting. So I started the life coaching because what I found with a lot of my clients was that when I first started out in health and fitness, gosh, 15 years ago, I thought that all I needed to do was teach my clients everything that I need. Everything they needed to know. So I just needed to impart all of my wisdom on them. You just need to eat this, you need to exercise, you need to do all these things. And what I found out was that knowledge does not mean that we're going to do it. In fact, even myself, I was a poor example of that. I had all of this information and I kept pursuing more and more certifications and degrees, thinking that the more I knew, the more I would be adherent to proper health.
Mhm.
And so then I was like, okay, well, that's not the problem. So it must be something different. And I went on to habits. And so I was like, okay, all we need to do is figure out people or get people to adopt new habits. And it was really fascinating to me as to why some people would, pick up habits really quickly. Like I was consistent in my exercise habit, no problem. But I was really not very good in my eating habit. I would, cheat and I knew what I was supposed to be eating, but it wasn't clicking in my head. And it was always fascinating to me, like, so why is it that someone could quit smoking for like 20 years and then all of a sudden start smoking again,
Right.
or stop drinking and start drinking again? And so what I figured out that is that it's stress that actually makes us go back to old habits that we haven't really put to bed. So we have neural pathways in our brains, right?
Mhm.
And those neural pathways, whenever we do a series of actions, a habit, those neural pathways become stronger. When we do something, they wire and fire together. And so changing habits is actually really different because those neural pathways are, you know, very deeply ingrained. And so we can create new pathways in our brain, but the old pathways actually never fully go away. It's kind of like cow paths. You can kind of still
Yeah.
see them in the ground. And so the reason why I picked up life coaching is because I found with so many of my clients that something would come up for them. So, like maybe a partner got sick, or their parent, or work got busy.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, all of their healthy habits took a tumble. And so, by doing life coaching, by bringing life coaching into the mix of health, what I'm able to do is coach clients on how those other aspects of their life really then influence their health. So when they have a dispute with their partner or their boss, that we can coach on that, which then prevents them from going to the emotional eating.
Mhm.
And so it's really kind of, we think about health as just this silo, but so many parts of our life really influence our health and our ability to take care of our health.
Now, how are you able to devise a diet with people
Mhm.
that allows them to be healthy, doesn't allow them to feel like they're being punished? Because of course
Mm.
we all know so many people who stick to a diet, and then when they go off it, they go off it. And it's, I think they feel like they've been punished all of this time. And
Yeah.
how are you able to do a long-term diet that people can stay with?
That's a great question. So the first thing is understanding why we're doing what it is that we're doing. Okay. So oftentimes, if our only reason behind doing the diet is a very surface level, like wanting to lose weight so that, you impress your, ex partner from years and years ago, you're going back to a high school reunion, sometimes that's good enough, but then it doesn't really sustain, past that, reunion, for example, that event. And so what I like to do is really consider, why are we wanting to change our habits? What is the fundamental reason? And it goes back to what we were talking about before, that we want to feel good about ourselves. We want to feel energy. For many of my clients, they want to, show their children that there's another way. They want to be better for their grandchildren and, be a good example. And so when we can tap into that reason of why they're doing it in the first place, then that makes it easier. So once we have that in place, what I do with my clients is we look at what I call 5 different biomarkers. And it's really just our hunger, our cravings, how we're sleeping, our energy levels, and then our mood. Okay. So those 5 things will tell us whether we're eating correctly for our body, whether we're exercising correctly for our body, and whether we're sleeping properly. Okay. And so when we have those things that are in line, so when we're eating properly for our body, we will have high energy, we'll have low hunger, low cravings, solid sleep, and a stable mood. Okay. And so with my clients, what I do is I start off with a very generic plan. It's very generic. And then what we do is we start to see how food makes them feel. And so, like, for one of my clients, she was a carbaholic, a self-proclaimed carbaholic. And she was like, I don't need to change my diet. I eat cereal for breakfast. It's all fine.
Right.
And so we shifted her to a higher protein breakfast for a while. And she was doing it and she was doing great. And then a few months later, she was on a business trip and she went to the lobby of the hotel. They had one of those, free continental breakfasts. And for all practical purposes, she picked a fantastic breakfast. She had oatmeal and she had yogurt. Okay.
Huh.
And later in the day, she found herself in the company pantry, like eating pretzels.
Right.
And she was like, what the heck am I doing? Why am I eating pretzels? I never eat pretzels.
Mhm.
And she was able to trace that back to her breakfast, that it didn't have enough protein and that it had too much carbohydrate in it, too much starch. And so by having that much starch in her first meal of the day, it created a spike of insulin and then a drop around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that caused her to want to eat something carby again to get
Right.
her blood sugar back up again. And so when we start to see the connection between our habits and how we feel, it's a different mindset than, I can't eat these foods because Elizabeth told me to, or the book told me not to, versus, when I eat this, I know that this is going to be a consequence later.
Right. Right. And I guess it's a matter of working the different things out for different people. There's a woman out here who does sports radio. She starts every morning with a pretzel and mustard, and that's it. She won't eat bread with fruit, that's it. But like,
Yeah.
she's a Philly girl, right? She's got to, every morning, and she's very thin because
Mhm.
she's so disciplined. Like, she eats that pretzel,
Mhm.
and that's it. I think she doesn't have another carb again.
Well, and everyone's body is completely different. So, as I mentioned, I start everyone out with a very generic plan. And then, based on those biomarkers that I mentioned, we start to adjust it. We add more fat, we take away carbs, we add protein. And so, based on how they're feeling, I can adjust their macronutrients, their fats, their carbohydrates, and their proteins to suit their goals and how they feel better.
Okay. Let me ask you this. I'm not sure how much help you can be. This is kind of for parents. This is also to allow me to complain about younger people, which I like to do.
Awesome.
Um, I give a lot of tours for say middle school kids.
Okay.
The middle school kids, especially raised around here, are the most tired human beings I have ever met in my life. They spend the whole tour looking for benches. And you don't want to be like a 70-year-old woman between them and a bench because they will run you over. And it was really funny because there's this room that's dark because they have the Declaration of Independence in there. I brought all these middle school kids there and they all just collapsed like nap time. This whole tour is 8 blocks, by the way. How do you, if you're raising your kid, and this seems to be the way so many of these kids are, how can you raise kids to bring them into proper kind of healthy practices?
Yeah, I think that starts with modeling the behavior that you want your kids to have. I can't obviously talk to, the middle schoolers in Philadelphia,
You could talk to them,
but
but
well, talk to why they're so tired.
I got you.
But yeah, I think that it all starts in the home. That when you prepare healthy foods, that's what your kids will eat. When you are active as parents, then that's what your kids will do. So yeah, and so even as a partner, if you want your partner to be healthier, you kind of have to model that behavior in yourself first. And then, so here's probably the answer to your question is when you see someone that you love doing something that you like, you have to catch them being good and praise them in it.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, that's hard, but all right, I'll try to
I
do
know. And it's because we're so wired to be like, oh, she's doing it wrong or he's doing it wrong. And finding the things that, they're doing poorly. But if we start trying to pay attention to the things that they're doing right and praise that, then probably more often than not, they will start to develop those habits that we want them to develop.
Sounds good. Let me ask you about this. So I want to get into when you changed things around for yourself is around 2017, right?
Okay.
Uh,
Um, moving to Mexico?
yes, you
Okay.
had a whole different job. We do a lot of talking about finding your calling and
Yeah.
so forth and how important that is. And I love to talk to people. Like I was an attorney for 25 years and I love talking to other people who make big switches,
Hmm.
especially later. So what kind of work were you doing back then?
Okay, so, well, I think we're talking about two different things. One is in 2005, I actually moved from the business world
Yeah, I got it here.
into personal training. And
Okay.
then in 2017, my husband and I moved from Austin, Texas to Mexico, which is where I
Okay,
am right
let's
now.
go to 2005 first. I want to
Okay.
hear about that. So what
Yeah.
work are you doing at that time? What's your life like at that time?
Yeah, so I was working in high tech. I was an executive, a sales training executive, and I, yeah, it was such a long time ago. My mom, who had battled breast cancer for some time, had recently passed from having the disease.
Right.
And that was back in 2001. And when I started looking into how do I not get breast cancer? Because I saw what it did to her, and I could tell that if I didn't change my life, that I was on the same path, the same trajectory as she was, and I didn't wanna do that to myself. So, I started getting myself healthier, and, in 2001, so that was right around the time of the Twin Towers, 9/11, and, right around that same time, I started having a lot of churn for my business, going from job to job, and I started questioning myself, like, what is my legacy? My husband and I don't have any kids, and people usually pass their legacy on through making the world a better place through their kids. And I was like, what do I started going to a therapist, probably more as a life coach than anything.
Right.
And she decided, or she suggested rather, that I pursue wellness coaching. And I was like, I could do that. So I started getting all my certifications together, and that was in September of 2005. And then in October 2005, I got laid off from that job that I was in. I was working as a business analyst for a software company at that point, and wondering, like, how am I making the world a better place doing this? And so that was really kind of the kick in the pants I needed, because at that point I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. I am helping people be healthier at this point then. So yeah.
So you started working on your own? Did you start working for yourself?
Yeah. So I was an independent contractor. I never worked for like one of those full service gyms or anything like
Right.
that.
Right.
And at the time, I knew that I could help people so much more than being a personal trainer. And I got my wellness coaching certificate at that point, and license actually. However, this was back in 2005. I didn't know how to market myself,
Yeah.
and I didn't know how to explain how I could help people um, at the time. And so since then, coaching has really become a lot more mainstream
Yes.
today. To Mexico from the US, and then moving to an online platform became easier because so many more people were open to coaching at that point.
So you coach people from all over the world, I take it.
I do. Most of my clients are in the US and Canada.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And or do you meet with people at all, or is it all online at this point?
It is all online.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. And
So yeah, we do Zoom calls,
when did you
video.
make that, which you've been teaching me how to do here? So when did you make that switch?
Well, I was doing a little bit of online coaching when we were still in Austin in 2017, but once we moved to Mexico, it was pretty much cutting the cord and doing it all online at that point. Yeah.
So everyone is coming into your world this last couple weeks. You
Yeah.
you were there ages ago, and it's going to change the world, isn't it? I mean, businesses are finding out we don't need as many offices. People are finding out I don't need to go into work. I
Mhm.
mean, as I was telling you earlier, I'm much more comfortable in the 1700s, but I had my aha moment was when I got invited to a party, and I thought, wow, I don't have to drive there. I could just turn it on. I can turn people down when I want to, and I can just turn it off and say the battery died when I want to. So, it's got all these pluses, but it must be interesting for you to see that, and it's going to be more competition for you because this is waking everybody up to the idea of I can move wherever I want, which is, I guess, what you were thinking back when you moved, that you could go to Mexico and you could still deal with everybody, all your clients, which is amazing.
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
amazing. Like now, everyone's thinking that, but what gave you the courage to do that? That's a pretty outrageous idea a few years ago.
Well, so what happened is that, gosh, 8 or 10 years ago, my husband and I spent a month in Belize.
Hmm.
And that was the first time that we both kind of looked at each other and said, oh my gosh, could we actually do this? Could we live in another country on a beach? Our house had become, or I should say, our lifestyle had started to run us. We had this amazing 5-bedroom house in Austin, Texas. We had a pool, we had 3 cars. We were living the American life. And, but our bills were just outrageous. And it felt like, yeah, our life was living us, or we were working to sustain this lifestyle. And whenever we traveled to Mexico, we really just, we loved it. It was just a simpler way of living. Nobody cares what car you're driving. Nobody cares what purse you're wearing. Nobody cares what brand of jeans you have. And to be quite honest, it's probably a liability to be too flashy here.
Uh-huh.
And so what we decided was, let's just sell it all and move to Mexico. At that point, um, the internet was good enough, and it's getting better every day. And my husband is a CEO of a tech company, or not CEO, sorry, CTO of a tech company. So everyone in his company is actually remote. They've been remote for years. And it got to the point where coaching and doing online business for me was actually pretty accessible at that point. People were already doing it online, and it allowed me to break into it. And so, it's funny you say that now everyone's going to be doing it, and everyone, I'm going to have more competition. But yes, but they're 4 years behind me, right? And there's a lot more awareness from people who are consumers
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
coaching and fitness and health, that now they're like, oh, I don't need to have someone in my local area. I have all of these people who are around the world who can help me, who specialize and relate to me so much better than the person who's just down the street.
Yeah, no, if it is going to be a huge opportunity for you. It's like I
Yeah.
always say, when if I hear about the cool place, it's not cool anymore, right? So if I hear about these things, everyone's thinking about this in these terms, in terms of being able to do this. So I'm sure this is going to be a huge thing for you.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and just to bring it back to, I was talking about 2001
yeah.
and, the Twin Towers.
Mhm.
I think that technology changed a lot at that point, and the way people worked really, because before that, I was doing a lot of in-person travel. But then afterwards, we really saw the boom of teleconferences and remote working more. And so, as much as I think that there are a lot of people out there who are afraid of what this is going to do to our economy, there's a lot of really cool opportunity at the same time. And I'm really inspired to find out how that happens. What's going to develop out of all of this. I don't know, it's just a really neat thing.
Yeah. Obviously, we talked to a lot of people about leadership principles.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talk about is really the first step, and it can be the only step for a lot of people, is taking leadership control of your own life. And that's
Mhm.
where so many people have difficulty. I mean, to do what you've done, which is, I'm guessing, that it's kind of spills over to everything you teach, because once you're able to transform your life, you've got the key. And when people might come to you with a problem about health, or they might come to you with a problem about their work, or they might come to you with a problem about their relationship, uh, it's all the same thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it is. So the type of coaching that I do with my clients is called causal coaching. And so a lot of our problems are actually the way that we think about them.
Right.
So, like, I've started doing this with myself and my husband. So there are times that my husband just irritates me. I'm sure everyone can relate to that. And, I start to notice the thoughts that I have in my head that are causing me to be irritated. Like
Uh-huh.
he didn't put the milk in the right place in the refrigerator. I'm like, there's my brain just coming up with shit, starting problems, like that person who's just poking the bear, right?
Right.
And so I'm starting to notice it in myself. And so that's the type of stuff that I work with my clients on, is having them notice how the way that they're thinking about their problems is actually the root cause of their problems.
Right. Right.
And so whether it's relationships or their career or an employee problem or whatever, then there's a saying that there are facts and then everything else is drama.
Yeah.
So when you have the facts and you work from a very non-emotional place, then things become very simple. It's just when we have thoughts about those things that we start to complicate them.
Right. Well, let me leave you with this question because it's the one that a lot of people are running into. What are you telling people right now whose business has just been shot down by this thing?
Yeah.
They're kind of out of control right now. They're kind of staying at home. They're trying to survive. What are the tips? What are the things you can tell them to help them get through this period?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so I think that the first thing is really honor and feel the feelings that you're feeling. So if you're scared, if you're worried, don't feel like there's something wrong with having those feelings. Now, where we get in trouble is when we get stuck in a certain emotion. And usually those emotions are like confusion or anxiety.
Mhm.
There are certain emotions that will propel us forward, and there are certain emotions that keep us stuck. And so I think it can be really awareness is actually key there. Is what's the feeling that I want to have that's going to propel me forward? And so, I can't really tell people that things are going to be fine, because that's a platitude. It doesn't make people feel better. But how can you serve yourself? How can you take care of yourself today so that you can take care of yourself in the future? If you're worried about money, what are the things that you can do today that will help you in the future?
Mhm.
If you're worried about your relationship today, or if you're worried about getting sick today, um, wash your hands, shelter in place, all of those things. You already know that stuff. Um, you know, is watching the news helping you, or is it hurting you? And I'm not saying that you should stick your head in the sand. I'm just saying having the news cycle on 24/7 probably isn't helping you in feeling better. You can watch it for an hour in the morning, in the evening, you'll be just as informed. So, really tuning into how certain things are making you feel, really paying attention to, am I procrastinating? Am I spinning? What are 3 things I can do right now that can at least make me move forward in whatever it is that I wanna do next?
Okay. My final question is,
Yeah.
anyone watching this who would like to reach you, who would like to try to get you to help them out, how can they look into that? How can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website, which is elizabethsherman.com. I'm also on LinkedIn at Elizabeth Sherma. I don't know why there's no N on there, but there isn't. And then I'm on Facebook at Total Health by Eliz, and my Instagram is eSherman68.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for talking to us here today. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, David.
All right.